Today on TwinCam, well, it's more British Leyland sports cars, and more Triumphs as well, because I have a problem. Anyway, having talked about the Triumph TR7 a couple of times over the last few months, I thought we'd dig into the marketing a bit. Because while this car was supremely important for BL's image, it was also a collaboration, bringing bits of Austin Morris, MG, Triumph and Rover together. And as such, it approached the genre in a way no BL sports car had before. If somehow you've come across this video having not seen my real life in-person driving retrospective on the TR7, then I'll put a card in the corner. We've also addressed the TR7 as part of US safety legislation, and in terms of how, I think at least, it remains both misguided and misunderstood. That's all a convoluted way of saying that this video is going to draw upon all those and be really rather nerdy. Starting with the fact that this brochure was published in November 1978, which means it's publicising TR7s built at Triumph's traditional home in Canley, shortly after moving from its original home at the infamous Speak plant. You can immediately tell that this is a Canley built TR7 because of the laurel wreath branding on the front, while the incredibly cool and incredibly 70s plaid seats were introduced the year before while still at Speak. The reason that matters is because the TR7 was already showing severe signs of failure. I mean, they did sell quite a lot of them, but the MGB remained more popular, which was massively concerning, and the final days and closure of the Speak plant was a huge moment in the history of the British motor industry. One of the first steps towards BL's rationalisation, but also something approaching an admittance that the TR7 wasn't being produced to the highest of standards. However, when we turn the page, the tone of the copy is as if this was a brand new car that was just being launched. Now, this is the only TR7 brochure I have, so I don't know whether the content remained the same from the car's UK launch in 1976, or they were putting a brave face on things and were explaining the principles and philosophy of the TR7 as if they really did have confidence in it. It also feeds right into my point about this not actually being a TR6 replacement, so if this isn't the original launch text, then it's possible that they were reacting to a backlash. Maybe I'm reading too deeply into things now, but anyway. Some years ago, we decided it was time for a new sports model to continue the successful TR line. Whatever we designed had to conform very strictly to existing and future legislation on safety and pollution. It would also have to be economical on petrol, and just as important, it would have to be something neglected in sports cars for years: comfortable. The requirements were formidable, but our designers readily accepted the challenge. The early sketches were fascinating. It was obvious from the beginning that this was going to be an exceptional car. Undoubtedly, the trial styling was strikingly dramatic and highly individual, and all the safety requirements had been designed into it. Its shape was totally out of the TR idiom. It had the look of a car of tomorrow. It was a purposeful wedge shape. The bonnet was low and sweeping and the tail was high and cut off. Stylish and purposeful. Now what about an engine to match its sleekness? It was decided that the engine was to be a 2-litre version of the Triumph Dolomite engine, an engine already famous for its power output at such a light weight. All that remained was to put our new brainchild to the test. The engine particularly was rigorously tested. It then goes on to talk about cold and hot weather testing and all that jazz, but we have, in this page, the basics of what the TR7 was. An MGB replacement, rather than a TR6 replacement, and effectively a comfortable saloon-based coupe rather than a traditional British sports car of the decade before. Now, I'm not saying that because of the engine, but because of the mechanical componentry beneath that would genuinely make the TR7 a nice car to cruise across a continent in. But we'll get to that later, as for now I want to address Harris Mann's handiwork. They're so proud of that controversial wedgy shape here, and I can't blame them. While a fair number of people do dislike it, and I blow hot and cold with it, the TR7 was incredibly striking for a mainstream British car of this era. People of my dad's age were little children when these were launched, and there was nothing that could compare in terms of exotica that you could actually see on street corners. The TR7 always looked like a supercar, and you can see that coming through both in production and concept. Though in this particular sketch, with its open top and crisper detailing, I can't help but see a heck of a lot of Fiat X19. But on this page, the text comes back to that saloon car refinement and space, something that the X19, or indeed any existing sports car, couldn't come close to replicating. They may have made the TR7 feel less involved, less gritty, but don't forget that even many sports car buyers are such for the style rather than dynamics. See the Nissan S30 as example 1. But by treating the TR7 as a saloon car, it meant BL could save a shed load of money, and as they went bankrupt in 1974, that was unfortunately necessary. I don't think there was any question that this would use an existing engine, but the suspension was masterminded by Sven King, famous for the Rover P6 and Range Rover. In fact, after BL's specialist division had been founded, he came to Triumph, designing a simple yet effective coil-sprung live axle for the Triumph Toledo and Dolomite. And it's the basics of that system that would be carried forwards not just to the TR7, but also the Rover SD1 in 1976. Now naturally, that was a problem for the folks who saw the TR badge and imagined it would have independent rear suspension. And while it was not sophisticated, it was effective. It was a supremely well-engineered live axle, and it meant the TR7 handled quite nicely. Heavy, I thought when I drove one, but competently, certainly. You can't knock the impact of practicality though, because with a boot so big and so much comfort built in, scenes like this were not a pipe dream. The 5-speed gearbox has synchromesh on all forward gears and is designed for smooth, precise gear changing. Automatic transmission is also available as an extra cost option. And since the car is capable of high speeds, the brakes are designed accordingly, with a discs front, drums rear combination incorporating direct acting servo with a tandem master cylinder. One of the major areas where the TR7 scores over its competitors is in its ride and handling. By choosing carefully chosen spring rates and long but controlled suspension travel, we've managed to give the kind of ride you expect only from a luxury saloon car. Extensive use of rubber mountings and bushes isolates the body from road transmitted noise. Anti-roll bars are fitted front and rear. The front suspension is by McPherson strut located at the top of the wheel arch and mounted to a lower linkage, which is an integral part of the stub axle housing. The rear suspension is the Triumph 4-link system with fore and aft location provided by 2 fabricated arms mounted to the body and the underside of the axle casing. Transverse location is by 2 inclined arms mounted to the body and to the top of the axle casing next to the differential unit. Coil springs are carried on the lower links and telescopic dampers are mounted on the rearward side of the axle. In short, the overall effect inside the TR7 is like riding in an armchair. And to keep up this impression of total comfort, it's worth mentioning here the heating ventilation system. We won't go into that one, but notice that comfort is the overarching theme of the entire first half of this brochure. There are images depicting exotic locations and sun, sure, but the reason you're meant to want one is for style allied to usability. There's nothing about sportiness or driving dynamics. And while marketing the TR7's usability credentials is important, I do wonder whether the performance-led buyer, the one that's so important to a car's overall image, has already subconsciously been turned off. That's not to say they don't want comfort as well, but we've heard about the 4-cylinder engine and the fact that it's there for the sake of economy, and that's hardly a real trait of desirability. Yet fortunately for us, that's immediately followed by some rallying action. For a few years, the TR7 was a very competitive rally car in its class, this one winning the Manx International Trophy in 1978. While Leyland did later switch to Rover SD1s, the TR7s, either as standard 2 litres, Sprints or V8s, always held their own and were very reliable in competition as well. Of course, the less said about that in real life, the better, but mentioning the rallying brings up two of the real what-ifs when it comes to the TR7. While the coupe body style was understandable for both comfort and safety, the fact that the vast majority only had that 104 brake horsepower slant 4 was such a shame. Had they launched the TR7 Sprint as intended, 127 brake horsepower would have been a very respectable figure, and for reliability, if more 3.5 litre Rover V8s had been available, I do wonder whether history would have seen the TR7 in a different way. In the event, the TR7 might as well have not seen either engine in the relatively tiny numbers that were available. Following the cannily built cars, they moved them to Solihull, Rover's traditional home, for one final year before Sir Michael Edwards killed the TR7 off. But before it died, it was the kiss of death for two factories, and if we ignore the claim, which we should, for the Triumph marque itself too. And I'm afraid that's all this brochure has to offer, and that means that almost the entire brochure is totally devoid of anything remotely sporting when promoting BL's corporate sports car. I absolutely cannot come to terms with how dreadfully poor this car appears to have been marketed. No wonder in this case that people view it as a bit of a wet sports car, one that didn't have the oomph or attitude required to be a proper sports car. While they aren't particularly sporting to drive, they were actively destroying any sporting intention by just harping on about comfort. It's madness. If you'd like to have a gander at these specs, then just pause the video now, and we're left, along with supercover, with a shot of the Slant 4 that didn't really impress anyone, no matter what life the basic engine would later live. But with that, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed the video, then please do click like and subscribe to TwinCam as well. I'm forever indebted to my wonderful Patreon supporters, so if you'd like to support me that way, then please do follow the link in the description and get access to this and many other brochures for your own viewing pleasure, and I'll have more videos coming along soon.